Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018. Come and give us a try sometime.
Hello, my name is Tony Lambrianou, and I ran with the Kray gang back in the 1960s. I wasn't in the firm itself. I was more like an associate member, along with my brother Chris. But I did get to know the twins well, and I saw a lot of what went on firsthand. I'll only ever tell this story once, and when it's done, I'm going to walk away from it for the rest of my life. I don't want to dwell in the past anymore, but to be free of it, I must confess it. I once made a promise to a remarkable woman, my probation officer, Mrs. Jean Heath, that I would someday tell of my experiences as a professional criminal and as an associate member of the notorious Kray firm. Mrs. Heath has since died, and I owe it to her, my loved ones and myself to offer this true account of a career which grew out of violence, flourished on fear, and culminated in murder, and ended in prison. So much has been said and written about the Kray gang that we have now become the stuff of legend. But at the heart of that legend are real live people, and if I hope to achieve anything, it's to present them through the facts, and not the fantasy of the way we lived. For years, I've been hearing what everybody else has to say about us in courtrooms, books and newspapers, and the twins have taken the chance to reply in print. I intend to set the record straight for all of us that stood together in the dock. In the previous episode, I'd been discussing my childhood in the post-war East End of London, how as kids we were treated to things like an apple, an orange, or some nuts in a sock for Christmas presents. I'll now continue the story. One day, I was sent home for having a hole in my shoe. It had been pouring with rain, and I walked across the assembly hall leaving muddy footprints, which showed up the hole. A teacher stopped me, and I had to stay off school for 3 days. In the end, my father found 3 shillings and sixpence to buy me a pair of pumps. It got very bad, but we weren't the only ones by a long shot. There were 3 sisters in that school who used to wear the same clothes every day. Each one would wear what one of the other 2 had been wearing the day before. My mum used to buy shirts and trousers for us at second-hand shops, and sometimes on credit. Everybody lived on the tally. In those days, because they couldn't afford cash, you would pay the tallyman a deposit, and then a certain number of shillings a week when he came round to the door for clothes or other goods. We had 2 tallymen, a big Jew and a little Jew. My mother could never afford to pay both of them, because that would come to 4 shillings a week. The first one to turn up got paid, and the second one didn't. In the end, they were racing each other to get to us first. The first suit I got, a gabardine jacket and slacks, was on the HP. It cost £11. The proudest day of my life was the day I first wore it. I thought I was one of the boys then. I'd grown up. Later, I remember my mother crying because the tallyman took Chris's suit away for the sake of 2 shillings a week. My mother lived for her 5 boys, and I saw her fight for us. I've seen her knock out more women than I've had hot dinners. If anyone had a go at one of her sons, She took it personally, and when she could, she'd give us treats. With Chris back from approved school, she used to take the five of us to the pictures at the Odeon in Hackney Road on a Monday night when my dad was out working as a relief chef. The best seats cost 9p. We used to have to queue for the cheap seats, which cost 3p. She took us to the circus too, and we all shared a quarter of sweets. I was already working in my spare time, humping bags of coal and coke. From the age of 8, I had to be out there earning on Saturday mornings, and I carried on doing it until I was 12 or 13. I used to get up early in the morning and take orders from all the people who lived around us. I'd go to the yard in Queensbridge Road and to Albert Usher's depot in Nuthall Street in Hoxton and bring the bags back. In the winter, it used to be freezing, but I'd get 6p a bag, and I used to give nearly all the money to my mother. My share, I spent on donuts, a real luxury. We also went round on race days, selling sheets with the dog results on them. We sold them by the gross, and our payment was to keep 44 out of each gross, which we could then sell for 5p a piece. Everybody who'd had a bet wanted to know the results, and we'd do 2 gross a night if we were lucky. Another few bob I used to make came from Bert the horseman, who had stables at Lea Bridge Road by the canal under the railway arches. We used to take horses from there to the Elephant and Castle to be sold, most of them to the knacker's yard. The journey would take us about 2 hours, stopping at the horse troughs to water them along the way. And we used to be paid 5 shillings an hour, half a crown for half an hour, and 3p for 15 minutes. Any horse going down there was worth at least £15. One day, a mate and I took 2 ponies and a foal to the Elephant. We sold all of them, got the receipt and kept £15 of Bert's money. We told him some story about losing it. Then there was the Saturday morning he sent me to fetch his tea at a cafe by Regent's Canal. He gave me a £5 note. That was a lot of money at the time, and a shop wouldn't accept it unless it was signed for. I got Bert to sign it and rode to the tea room on a pony called Nelson. I bought his tea, a sandwich, and 10 cigarettes. I then drank his tea, ate his sandwich, and smoked his fags, had it away on my toes, and ran off home. I left the pony in a field. I couldn't resist the money. People were so short then that very few ever had a holiday. But if they could afford it, they'd go picking hops in the fields of Kent, a very East End thing to do. Our family never had a holiday together, and the first one I ever had, I went on my own. I was taken to Eastbourne at the age of 11 by a family called the Hopkinsons, who lived above us in Belford House. There was Flo and Dan and their children, Danny, Terry, Rita, Maureen and Jean. We went away in his lorry, all 8 of us, and slept in hammocks inside it. I had no new clothes to take with me. I was wearing Leon's washed-out things. My mother scraped together £2 for me to spend, which for a kid then was quite a lot of money. The Hopkinsons were always considered to be better-class East Enders, with that little bit more money to spend on enjoying themselves. They moved out several years later, and they're all in America to this day doing well. It was around this time that the police called again on the Lambrianou family. One Sunday night, when Chris was 15, he went out and broke into a newspaper factory in Hoxton. I was at home with my mother, Leon, and my 2 younger brothers, when there was a knock on the door at 8 o'clock. 2 plainclothes police officers came into the house with Chris and a package of paper. They had arrested him for breaking into the factory and stealing the newspaper. I remember my mother in tears saying, "Why are you taking him over a package of waste paper?" He ended up before the London sessions and was sentenced to 3 years at Borstal in Hollesley Bay in Suffolk. He escaped from there a couple of times. Once he was caught in Ipswich, the second time in Woodbridge. While he was there, he represented the Borstal at boxing. He fought at the US Air Force Base in Woodbridge, and he was the middleweight champion of the county throughout those 3 years. It didn't take him long to build up a reputation as a daddy, the top man. On his monthly visits home, he was inviting characters that he'd met there, all the East End wide boys, who were a big influence on me. His attitude was becoming more aggressive, and I'm gonna beat 'em type of thing. That was Chris all over. I was 14 when he was released, and as soon as he came out, they stuck him in the army. They put him in the Pioneer Corps, which meant that he was considered to be an uneducated no-good, only fit for dog's body jobs. It was the dustbin of the British Army, for all the dregs they didn't really want there. He joined on a Thursday, and on the Saturday night, there was a knock at the door. It was Chris, in his uniform. He sat at home with a hammer, breaking his toes to get him out of the army. To my mother's horror, she had to see things at that time, which weren't very nice. The military police came and carted Chris off. Next thing we knew, he was in Shepton Mallet Army Prison, which is where he met the Kray twins for the first time. He got a dishonorable discharge from the army. Shortly after this, Chris, Leon and I went to see a film called The Blackboard Jungle. The title music was Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley. That was the start of rock and roll in England. Nobody had heard of it until they saw The Blackboard Jungle. It was all about kids in America with flick knives, drapes and tight trousers, and I'd never seen anything like it. Suddenly teddy boys were on the streets and everybody everywhere was saying what a bad influence they were. I'll never forget the day Chris came home with the drape, the velvet collar and the drainpipe trousers. He paid 15 quid for the suit, which he bought from Woods the tailor in the East End. The twins used to use him. They bought all their suits from his shop in Kingsland Road. My father didn't like the image, and he went absolutely potty. He got this suit, he cut it up, and he got the big stick out. The way we were brought up, in typical East End and Greek tradition, the old man was head of the household, and nobody, including my mother, ever questioned his authority or decisions. Even when we were grown up and married, he still kept the big stick by the dinner table. But the teddy boy influence had taken hold of us. Chris used to have rock and roll music blaring out round the house. We had a radiogram by this time. A van used to come round and you could buy singles off the van for 2 shillings and 6pence each. By now, I was at Queensbridge Road Secondary Modern School, where we all went, except for Chris. One day, a schoolmate called Peter Robertson turned up to class wearing the drape and drain pipes. A teacher, whom we called Clinker, told him to go home and change. His answer was, "Fuck off." It was unheard of to say that to a teacher, but it was very much our underlying attitude. School was just a big joke. To me, it was a waste of time. There was no future in it. Half the kids didn't even know the alphabet. The teachers felt that if they managed to teach you the 3 R's, if you could read and write when you left, then they'd done their job, but they were up against it. We used to play pitch and toss, throwing money up against a wall. The person who threw the nearest coin to the wall would pick up the kitty. We got involved in petty crimes, like stealing milk, or bullying kids in the school playground if we thought they had pocket money. We all gambled. On Friday afternoons, they used to beat us up. There were 3 teachers, Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Leary, and Mr. Eldridge. They'd all have tracksuit bottoms on, and they'd walk round the classrooms, pick you up by the lapels, and lay into you. None of us ever complained. We accepted that as part of our life. If I'd gone home and complained, I would have got a right-hander off my father. They were schools for crime, and I think the teachers accepted that's how it was going to be. Some better-class schools would take their pupils on organized trips to the museums and that. Not us. We were taken out on a sightseeing visit to Wormwood Scrubs, about 29 of us. We walked around the prison, and then the teacher lined us all up and said, "This is where you lot are going to wind up." We thought it was a big laugh, but it wasn't so far off the truth. Many of the pupils went on to become well-known villains, Hoxton boys like Tony Tubbsy Turner and George Murray, who ended up controlling the local lorry hijackings. I did do something useful during my school days, though. At the age of 14, I represented the school as a boxer. My father's best mate, Eddie Phillips, had fought for the British heavyweight title between 1938 and 1944. He was known as the Aldgate Tiger, and he'd fought Joe Lewis and Tommy Farr. He worked at Spitalfields Market on the fruit and veg, and he saw the potential of Leon, especially as a fighter. Chris had done his bit too, representing his approved school at Borstal. Another man my dad knew was Prince Monolulu, the black racing tipster from Charlotte Street. He used to wear an Indian outfit and a headdress with big plumes, and they used to go to the races together. He would say to me and my brothers, "You could be boxers, or you could be villains," and he'd tell my dad, "Your boys are fighters, one way or another." I don't think my dad understood it. Chrissy and Leon had been recognized as fighting boys among the schools in the area where we lived. They'd been in plenty of street fights. Leon was a good scrapper, and even as a young fellow, Chris had a reputation for being a bit of a lunatic. It was, leave it out a bit, don't get involved with him. He wasn't a bloke you could push. He would turn. He had a very, very explosive temper and didn't know what fear was. He was dangerous. When Chris had a fight, he didn't stop at a fight. He was never one just to use his fists. He'd want to pick up a tool as well. He'd think nothing of picking up a knife or anything else that came to hand. There was always something different about Chris and his fighting. As a kid, Jimmy was the only one of us with curly hair. It was jet black. He was a good-looking boy, and even as a young adolescent, he always wore a suit. He was a quiet fella, but if you upset him, he wouldn't forget it. He was an out-and-out street fighter who believed in settling his arguments with his fists. He was always very proud of the family name. Nicky, the baby of the family, had a wild streak as far back as I can remember. He was reckless, and he had a temper second to none. If he got something in his mind, he would be right, and that was the end of it. He was influenced by the East End, and by the brothers and the people around us, so I suppose he was destined to go the same way. He was to become the best money-getter of the lot of us. It was obvious to us at an early age that you didn't survive by being quiet. You survived by your fists and your boot. On Saturday nights, we used to watch the brawls at closing time. People used to come out of the bars fighting fit, and the women were worse than the men. 2 women fighting, usually about their kids, is something to see. And if you didn't have a family of brothers with you, you were nothing. Brothers were your strength. Apart from a rare few one-offs, all the major villains of our generation were from families of brothers. There were the Richardsons and the Frasers from South London, the Regans from West London, the Formans from Battersea, the Nashes from the Angel, us from Haggerston, and the Krays from Bethnal Green and Bow. Most of them were boxers. They came from that type of background, all the time fighting each other in schools and at national level. Football was another important part of life in the East End. Ron Chopper Harris and Alan Harris of Chelsea, and Bertie Murray of Chelsea and Brighton and Hove Albion came from the same school as me. Career opportunities at that time were very limited. The markets were a family thing, a closed shop. Tailoring and French polishing were very big, and if you could get into printing, it was a bonus. Other than going into these trades, your only hope of rising above the poor conditions of the East End was to be a boxer, a footballer, a showbiz celebrity, a thief, or a villain. At 13, I had become very well aware of the Kray twins when the story of their fight with the dockers spread round the East End like wildfire. They had walked into a pub, the two of them, shut the doors, taken on a whole bunch of dockers, and walked out. I was very impressed. If you were a docker, you were a tough man, the bee's knees. But even the dockers stood back and said, "These two are something else." They were fearless, the twins. That was the difference about them, and that was important in their careers. From my early teenage years, I was increasingly drawn towards the same criminal path, like Chris before me, and Jimmy and Nicky after me. But Leon, following his first early brush with the authorities, was 2/3 straight throughout his teens. He would later clean up his life completely to become a good and honest man. In the period after his Borstal, Chris was known to be up and coming and good at what he did. By the time he was 18, he tended not to get involved in the things that we younger brothers were up to. He was a loner, Chris. There were several little gangs around Haggerston, and Chris moved about from one to the other. He spent a lot of his time involved in dubious dealings in the West End, and he really started to take off. The rest of us too were becoming more and more notorious in the local area, especially in Hoxton, where previously other kids' fathers had smacked us round the ear hole. Now they wouldn't, but we weren't all bad. If we ever saw any women struggling along the streets with heavy bags, we'd carry their shopping. I went into the twins' house many times helping their mother, Violet, without ever realizing they lived there. I left school early, at 14, and took a job at the Sleepy Valley Bedding Company in Hackney Road in Bethnal Green. I got it through a youth employment agency where I didn't have much choice. I used to knock holes with a machine into the edges of the beds, and I was paid 2 shillings an hour. I gave my mother £2.10 a week. One day, I came out of work and saw Frankie Shea at the junction of Hackney Road and Weymouth Terrace, which is where his family came from. His sister Frances came along. She would have been about 12 or 13, very quiet and very beautiful with big eyes. It was the first time I'd ever seen the girl who would grow up to marry Reggie Kray. The bedding company was one of the longest jobs I would ever hold, and I worked there for 9 months. And from that period onwards, I started getting into villainy, properly. That's all for this edition, my friends. I'd like to thank you all for listening to part 4 of my story. I'll catch you again in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The